I see an urgency of the loss of our language, and that is in perils. Without our language, we are nothing. Our language, our Blackfoot language, is our way of life. I strongly and firmly believe in Blackfoot immersion. And my beliefs especially come from my own personal experience in teaching Blackfoot immersion to our children. It's not just about teaching our children any longer. Our children, or those Blackfoot people, any other Blackfoot people other than our children that want to learn our Blackfoot language, need to understand the historical aspect of what happened, how it happened, why it happened to be losing our language, and because of our language loss, where it's at. When I taught Blackfoot immersion, what I came to understand and realized and recognized was that I could not set an unrealistic expectation and think I could just start teaching our children our Blackfoot language. Our Blackfoot language is it's a way of healing as well. Now, with these children that I taught Blackfoot immersion, when they were able to understand what happened and how we lost our language and losing it today, our children were able to understand that language is the core of our culture. And because they came to understand that it's the core of our culture, it became a very healing process for them. And how did that occur? As they were learning to speak the language, they came to understand that our spiritual ways, how our ancestral ways were, and how our ancestors lived, and how we were connected to everything through language, and that our language, it's a very spiritual, intuitive language. And that is something that they came to understand as well, is that nobody can ever take that away from us. And once you're able to attain, they were able to attain speak the language when through wise practices, through Blackfoot immersion, our children came to share this openly with their families, with their grandmothers, and this also really helped their families, particularly their families, to get more involved. And their parents became so very supportive and receptive because they saw what it was doing for their children as well. And it really, especially, not only was it healing for them, but really strengthened their cultural identity and their spiritual connections to our ways of knowing. It was a very important part of Blackfoot immersion was also to ensure that our students, or I should say our children, came to understand and recognize more so the significant roles of our elders. And because of that, our elders were invited into the classroom to provide that oral tradition, and that was through storytelling. And the Blackfoot Immersion, some of the really wise practices, how the wise practices of Blackfoot Immersion, how it really reinstilled a lot of our cultural ways, spiritual ways of life, was just recognizing what it did for each of our children that were learning the language, was that they were calmer, they were better listeners, more respectful. They learned more about respect. They learned more about just the whole collective part of our ways. What our language does for us. It brings us to a place of connecting in a very kind, loving, and caring way. And that's how they projected themselves through language, and how they, like I said, when they went out to play or even within the classroom. Now, just to share a testimonial story, there was a child, one of the children, that was referred to the Blackfoot Immersion program. And this child in particular, she was in the special education program. When she was brought to our class, the Blackfoot Immersion classroom, to be introduced to myself as the Blackfoot teacher and the students, she was very withdrawn, no eye contact, and just a very low self-esteem. And the teacher, the special education teacher, Napiaki, she was a non-native teacher, and she told me and my educational assistant, this child has no conscience of anything. She does not have the ability to show emotions. She's basically non-existent. That's the best way I can interpret it. We took her in, we brought her in, and we had her come sit down, and of course I had her come sit down most of the time with me because of how she was. And this little girl, this child, was from one of the stronger language communities in Ghana, and she spoke quite well, spoke our language quite well. And we didn't know it yet. And so as time went on, she was just like any other student in the class, learning the language. Eventually she was comfortable enough and confident to go have her own space, which was her desk. And within about a month, I'd say it was about a month, she just opened up. And that's when we found out how she could speak some really good Blackfoot. She could speak her language quite well. And we really praised her for it. And the other children praised her for it. When going into 2 months, this child, she was basically putting into practice our ways of disciplining each other in our language. And she was managing the classroom, and everybody respected her for that. For this child, for her to come into the Blackfoot Immersion, to learn her language, and reinstill that, not only the cultural identity, but who she is, our language is who we are. And she was able to find her identity there as a Blackfoot child.
My name Nistu Andiko. Episawas. My English name is Gordon Fox. The Blackfoot language is like, to me, I see it as a wheel, a bicycle wheel if you want to look at it that way. The center is the language, or the hub, the core of it, and it branches out. Like from the language, you might get the traditions, which are broken down into a song, dance, the art portion of it, and you may get the also the storytelling handed down orally from our ancestors, our elders. Us Blackfeet, we like to pass on stories through our Blackfoot ways and our elders, and that's how we remember them. In the past, we never wrote things down. We learned orally. So that hub spreads out, and it shares a lot of many other things that we talk about, you know. So without the language, it's hard to continue on with our ways. You may know how to make moccasins, but that does not mean you are really fluent as a First Nations or an Indigenous Blackfoot person, unless you have the language. It takes us far back. It also takes us forward into the future. They seem to do a job of understanding. It also teaches them respect too, with the learning part of it, and that's the way I see it. You know, the immersion portion. It's very important.
Everything is based on relationships. And this is the things that when the elders came in to share the oral traditions and to share their stories, they shared with the children the importance of our history. Based on oral history, they shared with the children that we are spiritually connected to everything. The Creator provided us with what Mother Earth could give us, and the importance of how we use it is always to be respectful. So when the children went out to pick berries or to pick sweet grass, we always had to be in the company of our elders to ensure that they learned the proper protocols, the proper spiritual protocols that are very essential to the whole Blackfoot immersion. In other words, learning our language. So it is not just about teaching our language. There's the holistic perspective of what it entails. The historical, the truth, Igapi, what happened? How did we get here? Why did we come to this place? Because if they don't understand that and we don't teach them the history, it's not going to make sense. They may learn the language, they may be excited, but it's so important for them to be able to embrace it the way they need to, especially in our spiritual ways. We have to teach them that and to be able to move forward. It's very significant to the Blackfoot immersion by you using it, the conceptual way of teaching, because that brings them that personal nitsutapi, real person experience with the hands-on of being directly connected, particularly spiritually, to our history, our ancestors, to our Mother Earth, the gifts that the Creator has provided for us. It's also important for our children to understand the interpretation of all this. And like I said, it has to be taught conceptually. And this is why we bring them out, so they can, because everything's based on relationship, particularly spiritually for us Blackfoot people, our children have to experience that. And that's how they are going to really embrace with the language, which is our culture, and be inspired to really strengthen their cultural identity through the culture. The Blackfoot language has to be at the core of our culture and in everything we do in the future.
Okay, nistawana go Gaddafi. My English name is Kiowa Thunder Chief. Nimsto sitabi Gano. Nitsit domik dach Blackfoot Immersion. I am learning the Blackfoot language. I've been learning it since I was born by my grandma. And I, as a Blackfoot person, think that this is essential for helping us reattain our cultural identity that we lost in residential schools. My language helps me achieve knowledge and understanding of my ancestors and how they lived back in the day. And I want to know more about them, and yeah, it just makes me feel good that I know more about them. And these are things that the Blackfoot culture has taught me. Respect others, and if you want to be respected, you have to respect others. When we integrate Blackfoot immersion into schools, we will start to see a sense of healing in our communities, and it will help boost our knowledge about our ancestors and how they lived long ago.
Okay, nistawana gok bugitsawagi. My English name is Naila Thunder Chief. I started to learn the Blackfoot language when I was very young. My grandparents taught me at about age, even before I was born, because my mother sang Blackfoot songs. I believe the Blackfoot Immersion program is important because it strengthens our roots and it helps us connect with other Blackfoot people, and we can pass on to the new generation of children, and we can share our knowledge and the stories and legends of my culture and other ways of living and knowledge. Blackfoot immersion means to, it all strengthens us. The elders teach me ways of living in the Blackfoot culture, and just our traditions and what happens on special days, if we have how to dance and how to bead and stuff. The elders spiritually teach us how to smudge and connect with the Creator.